Did you know that America once contained a black community so prosperous, so self-sufficient, so extraordinary that its own people called it Black Wall Street? A community with its own hospitals, law firms, banks, hotels, movie theaters, newspapers, and schools. A community where $1 circulated through black-owned businesses 36 times before it left the neighborhood. And did you know that in less than 16 hours, in the summer of 1921, that community was burned to the ground, that airplanes were used against American civilians, that 10,000 people were made homeless overnight, that the government not only failed to stop it, but actively participated? This is not a story about a riot. This is a story about the deliberate destruction of black wealth. Follow Michelle Duffy TV, like and subscribe, and stay. Because this story changes everything you think you know about why the racial wealth gap exists today. Part 1. Indian Territory, 1898. To understand Greenwood, you have to understand where it came from. And it starts not in Oklahoma, but in the aftermath of the Civil War. After emancipation, some formerly enslaved black people were granted allotments of land in Indian Territory. The Dawes Act had broken up tribal land, and some black freedmen who had been enslaved by the 5 civilized tribes received allotments in the process. This land would become the foundation. Greenwood was founded in 1906 by O.W. Gurley, who purchased land in Tulsa and sold parcels exclusively to black buyers. He had a vision to create something for black people by black people. Then J.B. Stratford arrived, a lawyer and entrepreneur who pushed the vision further. He built the Stratford Hotel, a 65-room luxury hotel, the largest black-owned hotel in the United States at the time. These two men, Gurley and Stratford, planted the seed. What grew from it was extraordinary. Part 2. The city they built. By 1921, the Greenwood District of Tulsa, Oklahoma, was one of the most remarkable communities in American history. Period. Not remarkable for a black community. Remarkable. Full stop. The 1920 census recorded a multitude of African-American-owned businesses in the community, including billiard halls, clothing stores, music shops, furniture stores, hotels, restaurants, and a movie theater. According to the 1921 City Directory, Greenwood comprised 191 businesses. It was also home to a library, 2 schools, a hospital, and 2 newspapers. Let's slow down and look at that list. Not just restaurants and barbershops, a library, a hospital, 2 newspapers, a movie theater, law offices, doctors' offices, hotels, real estate firms, insurance companies. $1 spent in Greenwood circulated through black-owned businesses 36 times before it left the neighborhood. Black-owned storefronts, counter rising to 36. Compare that to today, where studies show that $1 in some black communities circulates only 6 hours before leaving. In Greenwood in 1921, 36 times. That is not an accident. That is the product of deliberate economic philosophy, community discipline, and mutual investment. Booker T. Washington himself visited Greenwood and was so astonished by what he saw that he named it Black Wall Street. And then there was the other side of the Frisco Railroad tracks, White Tulsa, rigidly segregated Oklahoma. The very segregation meant to suppress black people by forcing them to stay within their own district became the foundation of their economic power. Because every dollar stayed inside Greenwood. Because every professional served their own community. The walls built to keep black people out accidentally built a fortress of black wealth. Part 3. The Trigger and the Truth, May 30th, 1921. A young black shoe shiner named Dick Rowland rode an elevator operated by a white woman named Sarah Page. Something happened on the elevator that caused it to jerk or lurch. Dick Rowland bumped into or stepped on her foot. She overreacted and things spun out of control. That's it. That's the inciting incident. A teenage boy possibly stumbled on an elevator. Sarah Page herself did not press charges. There is no evidence a crime occurred. The Tulsa Tribune reported that a black man had attempted to rape a white woman. Whites in the area refused to wait for the investigative process to play out. An armed white mob gathered outside the courthouse where Rowland was being held. Black veterans, men who had fought for this country in World War I, armed themselves and went to protect him. Shots were fired. And then the mob turned toward Greenwood. Part 4. The Massacre, May 31st into June 1st, 1921. Mobs of white residents attacked black residents, homes, and businesses. 35 blocks were systematically looted and burned, destroying 190 businesses and leaving 10,000 people homeless. Systematically. That word matters. This was not chaos. This was organized destruction. Rioters looted homes before burning them. They drove trucks through the streets and filled them with furniture, jewelry, and valuables before setting the buildings on fire. Sometimes black women would even see white women walking down the street wearing their stolen jewelry. And then there were the planes. Aircraft flew over the Greenwood District during the massacre. Armed white men were in those planes. They flew over black homes, and those homes burned. An estimated 150 to 300 deaths occurred during the destruction of the Greenwood area. Rioters destroyed every building except one, the Vernon AME Church. Hundreds of African Americans died, and some remains are still being found today. No insurance claims were honored for African Americans in the Greenwood District. Lawsuits filed by African Americans had claims over $4 million, worth nearly $60 million today. They received nothing. Part 5. They tried to rebuild and were stopped. Here is the part of this story that most people never hear. The people of Greenwood tried to rebuild, immediately. They were still burying their dead when they started making plans to reconstruct. Work started immediately after the massacre, and by the end of 1921, hundreds of structures had been rebuilt, including the Dreamland Theater. By 1925, Greenwood was ready to hold the annual conference of Booker T. Washington's National Negro Business League, and by 1942, the neighborhood was home to more than 200 black-owned businesses. They rebuilt. Against everything. Without insurance, without government assistance, without justice, they rebuilt. But the city of Tulsa wasn't done. In the 1960s and 1970s, the era of urban renewal, a federal highway was routed directly through the Greenwood District, cutting through the heart of what had been rebuilt. Businesses were displaced. Homes were demolished. Urban renewal. Two words that across this country, in this era, almost always meant the same thing. Black neighborhoods demolished. Black wealth dispersed. Quietly, legally, with federal money. And here's why this story matters. Whites were resentful that black people no longer passively accepted second-class citizenship. Tulsa's rapid change in racial demographics made the city ripe for a massacre motivated by white animosity against black economic progress. The trigger wasn't a stumble on an elevator. The trigger was black excellence. The trigger was $36 circulating through black hands. The trigger was a hospital and a library and a hotel and a newspaper that white Tulsa could see from across the railroad tracks. Black Wall Street wasn't destroyed because of Dick Rowland. It was destroyed because it existed, because it worked, because it proved something that the racial hierarchy of America could not allow to stand. The fire didn't start with the planes or the torches. It started with the sight of black people thriving. In 2021, 100 years later, President Biden visited Tulsa and promised federal action. Survivors and descendants are still fighting for reparations today. The ashes are 104 years old. The debt is still unpaid. Follow us for more hidden black history on Michelle Duffy TV. Like and subscribe, because these stories deserve to be told. Please comment. Did your school teach you about Black Wall Street? The full story? Tell us what you knew and what you just learned. We don't glorify injustice. We reveal truth. So history can't repeat itself.